we talked about J.J. Watt being released from the Texans on Saturday. That was gigantic news. It kind of shook around the NFL, and there is a lot of interest for the Pro Bowler. I don't know, I think he's an 8-time Pro Bowler in his 10 seasons, something ridiculous, a lot of Pro Bowls. J.J. Watt is a phenomenal player. I don't need to tell you that. I'm pretty sure you already know that. But we touched on it kind of on the end of the J.J. Watt segment last time, talking about where his potential destinations might be. And we didn't really get into it, so I thought, well, let's kind of revisit that and kind of go deeper into where J.J. Watt could potentially be going. J.J. Watt had a $17.5 million cap hit, so it was an expensive player, so financially it makes sense why the Texans released him, even though if you watch the segment from Saturday, you can definitely tell that I disagreed with it and I just didn't understand it from a moral position. But regardless of that, he's going to take up a big chunk of cap space, and he is going to fill a gap that doesn't necessarily need to be filled by a lot of teams. But that especially a lot of teams that are contending, because the important thing to note is that J.J. Watt is probably going to go ring chasing. I mean, that is the most logical path forward for J.J. Watt. He's been stuck on the Texans for his entire career. They've made the playoffs a couple of times, and they looked like a promising team, but as we've seen in the last 2 seasons, that has all gone burning down. So with J.J. Watt being 31 and him entering the final years of his prime, he is definitely going to go ring chasing. So not only do you need to find a team that is going to be a contender, but you also need to find a team that has the cap space, or at least the potential to have enough cap space to bring him on the roster at a relatively high cap hit. It's not going to be as high as $17.5 million. I mean, the good thing for those contending teams for J.J. Watt is going to be the fact that he did not have his best season. He probably had his worst season as a pro, so that can artificially bring down the price of the contract for Watt. But regardless, here are the destinations that I think have the best chance of landing J.J. Watt. And the first one that we should definitely address is the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is the big one. They've had talks of playing as a family, but the big problem with the Steelers is they do not really have the cap space. They have a lot of big-name free agents. They have a lot of good young players that are going to be expected to be paid soon. And really, the money is the only thing that is preventing J.J. Watt from being a Steeler straight away. Big Ben is going to have to restructure his contract. He's got a gigantic cap hit as well. It's something like like 43 million, a gigantic cap hit. And even if you restructure his contract, that's only going to save you about 15 to 16 million when the Steelers are about, if I remember correctly, about $40 million in the hole. So they would have to do a lot of work to sign JJ. I don't know what it would necessarily take to be able to pull that off. It's definitely the most entertaining idea of pretty much all the teams that I have on the list today. The Steelers, I mean, being able to play with your brothers is probably every football player's dream, like a football family's dream, the ability to play with one another on the biggest stage. So, I mean, it's definitely an entertaining option. It's definitely a fun option, but is it the most realistic? I think this is probably the most unrealistic option out of the teams that I have on the list today. Next team is the Patriots. The Patriots were one of the worst pass rushing teams in the NFL last season. It's the team that, out of all the teams on the list today, it's the team that makes the most sense in terms of trying to fill a position. The Patriots have the cap space. They have a fantastic coach. They're going to have returning players on defense. And there's somebody that can absolutely use a pass rusher like J.J. Watt. Again, one of the worst pass rushing teams in the NFL last season. It's a team that I think is going to be much better. And it is going to, especially with some changes on offense, if they get that quarterback, whoever that may be, some weapons, whether that's Cam Newton, whether that's maybe like Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew, or a quarterback that they draft, like whoever that quarterback is, they're going to need some offensive weapons, so that'll make them better offensively. The Patriots are not as bad as a destination as most people think. I think they have the potential to make the playoffs next season. I think they'll probably be around that 10-6, maybe 9-7, 8-8 range if they get some help that they need. And J.J. Watt would definitely be the help that they need, especially at the edge rushing position where they were, again, one of the worst teams in the NFL. So is there enough to attract J.J. Watt to the Patriots? That's the ultimate question, because out of the most teams on this list, this is probably one of the teams that are more less more or less, that are less likely to make the playoffs this next season. So if JJ Watt is going to go ring chasing like a lot of people think he is, this probably doesn't make sense from a ring chasing perspective, but in terms of a fit and a need between a player and a team, this is a pretty good match. Next team on the list is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I was doing research for this segment, and I thought there is no way that the Super Bowl champions could be in the running for somebody like Watt. Because normally teams that win the Super Bowl are tight on the books, they're very tight in the wallet, they have a lot of tough decisions to make, and that's one of the reasons why it's very rare for teams to repeat as Super Bowl champions, because what it takes to get to the Super Bowl is a lot of good players, and often players that take up a lot of cap space, so it's very hard to keep them there long-term, keep them in the mix. But the Buccaneers have done a fantastic job of managing their roster. They are above the cap, so I think they have anywhere from like $20 to $28 million in cap space, if my memory serves correctly. And they do have a lot of players on the defense that are coming off their rookie contracts or expecting new contracts that they do need to pay. So the Buccaneers do have a lot of financial decisions that they have to make. And I think if you take a look at somebody like Shaq Barrett, even though I think he probably ends up staying in Tampa, reports are that he really enjoys Tampa Bay. He wants to stay there, but he is a player that is going to be expecting to be paid. Other people like Levante David as well. There's a lot of the front seven for the defense for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that are either free agents or may expect to get paid. And Ndamukong Suh is another name that you can throw in the mix. So when you take a look at somebody like JJ Watt, who did not have such a good season, so you can get him at a reduced price, and he is a really good player, you could realistically see a situation in which Watt not only goes to a Super Bowl contender straight away, but is also a cheaper option to somebody like Shaq Barrett, who, again, wants to stay in Tampa Bay, but might not because there is not really that much money there, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to have to try and keep much of that core together. So essentially what I'm saying to you is that JJ Watt could be a cheaper but equally as good replacement, an older replacement but almost equally as good replacement for somebody like Shaq Barrett or Levante David, who wants to stay in Tampa Bay but can't stay in Tampa Bay because they want to get paid, and the Buccaneers don't have the money for it. Next team on the list is the Miami Dolphins, a young, on-the-rise team with a great culture under Brian Flores. They have a lot of cap space, and like the Patriots, this is another destination in which the primary attraction to this for me is a younger team that needs to fill a position that JJ Watt can fulfill, kind of like the New England Patriots. The Dolphins have a Super Bowl caliber defense down there in Miami, and one of the weakest positions on that Super Bowl caliber defense was the linebacking core. Now, obviously, JJ Watt is an edge rusher, whether that's playing defensive end, whether that's playing an outside linebacker in a 4-3 or a 3-4 defense. I'm not exactly sure what the defensive scheme is for the Dolphins because I think they have a new defensive coordinator. But regardless of that, whether that's a defensive end, whether that's a linebacker, an outside linebacker in a 3-4, JJ Watt can absolutely fill that position and really tighten up the weakest part of a Super Bowl caliber defense for the Dolphins. He could be a good opposite piece to Emmanuel Ogbah, who had a pretty good season for the Dolphins. So I really like this option. Again, the Dolphins are kind of in that bubble picture where it's like they can be really good next year and they can potentially go anywhere from like 11-5 to 9-7 and make the playoffs, and could potentially be some Super Bowl contenders if they have a really good season, but it's the team that may not quite be there yet. And Watt, again, is looking for a ring at this point in his career. So Dolphins are a good young option in which he would fill a need, and he's going to be part of a really good defense, but is he going to win a ring in Miami? I'm not necessarily so sure. Next is Washington, and all I have to say about J.J. Watt to the Washington football team is this combination. This is all I have to say to justify this. Chase Young and J.J. Watt. That has the potential to be one of the scariest pass rushing duos that the league has ever seen, and it's nearly a guaranteed trip to the playoffs because of how bad the NFC East is. I think the Cowboys are going to continue to be stinkers. The Eagles are going to have to figure some things out. The Giants are kind of in limbo as well. Again, I've said a couple of times on the show already that I think Washington is in a really good position to kind of run the NFC East for a couple of years to come. So if J.J. Watt wants an easier trip to the playoffs on a really good defense that has a lot of momentum going for it, Ron Rivera is a great coach. This is a good option for Watt as well. And similarly, the next team is the 49ers. Again, similar to the reason in Washington, that combination between Chase Young and J.J. Watt. Imagine a Joey Bosa and J.J. Watt pass rushing tandem on a contending team like the 49ers. Did I say the wrong brother's name? I might have said the wrong brother's name, Nick or Joey. I think it's Nick. I might have said the wrong brother's name, but regardless, Bosa and Watt on the 49ers defensive line would be absolutely scary. He could take Kerry Hyder's place, who Kerry Hyder is a free agent, so you can do a 1-for-1 there, move somebody out, move a better player in, even though he's going to be a little bit more expensive. The only thing that I have to say about the 49ers is that they have a lot of problems in the secondary in terms of having a lot of free agents back there. So the cornerback position and the safety position, lots of free agents there. I think the 49ers will probably opt to spend their money there instead of on somebody like J.J. Watt, but still, that is a pretty good, attractive destination for J.J. Watt. So out of all of those are the destinations for Watt that I think are the most reasonable, those that are potential playoff contenders, and then of course there's the Buccaneers, who are the Super Bowl champions. Those are the teams that are playoff and Super Bowl contenders that not only have the cap space to do something, apart from the Steelers, they have the cap space to do something, they have the talent that could surround Watt, and something that and Watt can fill a position for those teams. So those are some good teams that I think are in the running for Watt. We'll have to see. I mean, obviously with a player like Watt, there are going to be a lot of teams that are going to try and make some moves to try and get him, but we shall see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this segment from the Hard-Headed Sports Podcast. You've heard what I've had to say, now I'm interested to hear what you think as well. If you enjoyed this highlight from the show and want to watch more highlights from the show as they come out after the show's completion, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all very soon.